broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Oh. There it is.
Here
super,
it is.
Super surreal.
Edelweiss once again.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are going over episode 2 of Man in the High Castle, Sunrise. I'm your host, Keith Black. You can find me on the internet at Keith W. Black. I'm accompanied by Taylor and Zachary. Zach, why don't you go ahead and let them know where we can find you?
My name is Zach Schwartz. You can find me on Twitter at Zach is Zach.
Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Taylor Boldt. You can find me on Twitter at Tayboldt, that's Tayboldt, or on Instagram at Tboldt, also Boldt.
So guys, as you can see, the second episode didn't really give us a lot in terms of plot development and where we're going, but it did give us a lot in terms of characters and who these people are, who we're following along through their journeys, whether it be on the Pacific or the West or the East Coast. And one of the things that I'd like to start with is just your guys' opening impressions of the episode as a whole and what you feel you really got from it based off of episode 1 and where it left you hanging. Zach?
I initially had thoughts that Frank was going to be kind of one of those top tier cowards that you see in shows that you kind of are just like, this guy's only here to disappoint me. He's only here to out my favorite character, get them in trouble time and time again. I'm not going to say I've been too wrong so far, but my opinions of him have changed.
Sure, yeah. I think that Frank probably had the most interesting sort of arc. Oh, I don't know, Joe too maybe, but Frank had a really cool arc from where he started, from where we left off last episode, from where we picked up, it's kind of the same place, and then he ended at a totally different place, and I think rightfully so. And I think they did a really good job of earning that, so I'm excited to see where he goes. I know there's a lot of, I feel like it was a character-heavy episode in that there were a few key plot points, but most of them were about stuff that we didn't know about the characters, I thought.
And I think that's something we need, especially after the first episode. I felt like we were left a little hanging on who are these characters. Like,
well, it's a lot to set up in one episode, I guess.
Yeah, an entire world based off of a novel. But like Juliana, for instance, I was concerned in the first episode that she seemed to be a little bit distant and like she didn't really have any emotional background. And we really got to see in this one that she took some hits and emotionally she kind of broke down. Which is a great feeling to see a character transition when you have that fear in the beginning episode. It was like, oh no, is this what I'm getting to? I'd just, I'm sitting down, I'm going to binge watch this. Like, this is what's going to happen. I'm committed.
Honestly, my biggest problem with this show right now is that I'm only watching one episode a week. And I'm having to pace myself so that we can do this show.
And you have to, though, because I know that I would let some spoilers out. I know that I would absolutely
There's
reveal
no
too
chance
much.
of me being able to section it off in my mind. Because it picks up right where it leaves off. It's one continual linear thing, and I think that's sort of what makes it so powerful. I want to see the rest of this story.
It's so good. Yeah. And let's move into like the relationships. I think that one of the easiest ones is Frank and Juliana. We started off with that relationship in episode 1, and you're getting to see that they're kind of a romance between them. But in episode 1, she leaves him, and she leaves him without saying a word. She kind of just walks out the door, and Frank's kind of set with the decision, well, now I have this information, then I know that she's ran off with some footage that potentially could be harmful towards her and myself. Do I tell the authorities or do I kind of just protect her?
Right.
And it kind of switched a little bit in this episode.
I think for me, you sort of were left thinking Juliana is cold-blooded. I mean, leaves the guy high and dry, no real goodbyes. You said sees her sister die and doesn't really have as much reaction as I think most of us would have thought. So it was kind of hard to get to know her. You do see things kind of start to turn in this last episode.
Yeah, I think Frank, especially when it comes to their relationship, Frank had a much more interesting journey because he was sort of making the decisions. Like, she made the decision last week to leave, but more so this episode than last episode. Like, there's still very much a connection there. And I'm not sure, when we left off, I'm not sure that I understood that there was still that connection. I think that, she left her locket or her necklace, like, hey, I'm leaving, like, I'm leaving, like, love you, I guess. I don't really know. Maybe. But she's gone. But the fact that he's defending her at the beginning of this episode and sort of taking these hits for her, and the fact that she calls him again, And she even tells Joe, like, I have a Frank.
Yeah,
there's a Frank. I'm like,
say.
oh, so there's still a connection. Like,
Yeah.
she's not just like leaving him high and dry necessarily.
True.
But we will see how that plays out, I guess, because Joe's right there, and he's a good-looking guy. So.
And again, it's like if you're gonna cast a show, you're like, you're not. It's if the guy was unattractive, you're gonna be like, no, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's like
she's got Frank.
Yeah, she's got Frank. Frank is cool. You know, they living together. You know, they're sharing the
They're
space.
serious, yeah.
Can we talk about Frank's name for a second? We're just gonna sidebar for a second. Frank. Like
Frank.
Are his parents just like the like the meanest
Yeah.
people ever? What should we call him, sweetie? Let's call him Frank. No one's gonna suspect that, Frank.
Well, I also didn't realize that the Obergruppenführer, his name is John Smith. Is that right? Like, we're learning a lot of new names.
Yeah, like, wow.
It's going to be easier to talk about it because it's much simpler versions, I think. So Frank is easy. John Smith is easy. Though I have learned how to say Obergruppenführer now.
Regrettably, like you wasted all that
I guess
time.
I
Like,
did.
yeah, now what are you gonna do? When are you I hope that there's not a scenario where you're gonna be using that regularly in your day to
That's
day.
true. Yeah, it's probably just for this show.
So we open in the prison, and Frank is clearly there, and he's set up with an instance of, I need to protect Juliana, and that's all is on his mind is he's not going to tell her, and he's got this neighbor, his companion in the cell next to him, who's just kind of berating him, like preaching propaganda of the resistance, and is a situation I don't know whether that would make it easier or harder.
Well, we learned that his neighbor is actually the man who gave Trudy the film in the first place. So he's kind of the one that got all of them into this mess. Well, I guess Trudy did it. She was in that as well. And then Juliana obviously decided to take it. But he sort of was the instigator. And so Frank is put in a cell next to him. But can I just, for a second, I'm not sure the Japanese interrogation system in this episode. I'm like, why would you put them where they can talk to each other?
Like a hole through the wall,
Yeah.
might as well have an intercom.
And they were really generous with how much time they would give him to decide. They were like, think about it. Like, just think about it. We want this information, but think about it, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you later, I guess, and see what you're thinking. I don't know. I feel like if you wanted to interrogate someone, you probably do a little bit more. Tell me now. Tell me right now.
Yeah.
Not like, we'll come back in a few hours, and if you feel
they
like
were
it.
pretty lackadaisical when it came to the interrogation techniques.
Well, the whole time I was sort of sitting there like, okay, the guard's in the hallway, and he's just going to come in and beat up both of them. And there's no guard, no one got in trouble.
No.
Got away with a lot.
Do you feel like having the resistance member in the guy who, like you say, he's the linchpin, he started the whole thing, do you think having him next to it improved his resistance to telling them where she was?
I think
it elongated the situation?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately, not to jump too far ahead, but I mean, ultimately the decision that he made, which I'm gonna say it was to not reveal the information to them. I don't think that there's any chance he would have made that decision without the bits and pieces of, hey, evil only triumphs when good men do nothing.
Yeah.
Playing the voice of reason, sort of playing that voice in his ear, almost like that good angel on his shoulder saying, no, you don't tell, you shouldn't tell. We can only defeat these guys if you don't say anything.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know, like what do you think, looking at who he was at the very beginning of the episode, or maybe I should say the end of the last episode? I mean, do you think that he would have resisted like that
had the guy not been in the cell? I mean, I would have think that the love for Juliana in itself would be a little bit better. I would like to think that regardless of the resistance member next to him, that he'd be like, okay, well, I'm living with this woman. I love this woman.
Like
I'm
he
not
would find some sort of reason.
I'm not going to give her up specifically because he's made this commitment to her. And I think in a world like this, you make those decisions are way heavier. Like if we're dating somebody, it ends. It's on whoever we date. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. But in this world and the environment they've set up, the oppression from the high up down, you need to be very selective of who you hang out with. And so if you're deciding
a small circle of friends,
and if she decides she's going to date someone who's Jewish, and vice versa, she needs to know in that society, like, I'm making a gamble that I'm risking my life just by being with this person. And so for him to just give her up, I feel like that's a very weak man if he's like, look what she did for me every day we were together. Yeah,
well, that's the thing we didn't know, is that Frank is Jewish.
that's his new name. His new name is Frank Frank.
Frank is Jewish. And I mean, obviously his family is as well. And the Japanese either knew that already or they figured it out. And the Japanese, I'm referring to the government of the Pacific States, but they either knew it already or figured it out and leveraged that against him, I think, pretty effectively, except that they didn't get the information. So I guess not really effectively if you look at it that way. But yeah, that's a big secret for her to keep for him. So I kind of think that it's only right that he would return that, but I'm not sure at the beginning of the episode that I thought that he would do that.
No, again, I
definitely didn't think he would. I thought with the stance that he took, go to the police, turn this in, you cannot possibly have this. Even when he saw the footage in the first episode and said, oh, that's fake, that's got to be fake, that sort of quick knee-jerk judgment, I thought, okay, there's no way this guy's
going to withstand
2 hours in a cell, let alone takes a beating. And I don't know. I mean, maybe having the name Frank, he got used to those kind of beatings.
Yeah, I guess, maybe.
I
don't know.
I think there's two things that he needs to be appreciative of. Is one, that he wasn't in a Nazi, interrogation room, because I'm assuming it wasn't going to be nearly as pleasant. And the second comment is, if either one of you guys was in his situation and you're basing your decision purely off of what you know from Juliana right now, so what you've known from these 2 episodes, her emotional, her personality, like her drive, everything about her, Taylor, would you have ratted on her, or would you have stayed strong just based on what you've known from these 2 episodes?
Sure. I mean, like, if I were Frank.
If you were you in Frank's situation.
If I was me in Frank's place. I mean, I'd like to say, like, I would like to think that no, I wouldn't have ratted on her. Again, I've never been in an oppressive situation like that. Where I've never been in Japanese-run San Francisco.
Oh man, that's right.
Yeah, I hear it's great.
Your keto would be on point.
I'm sure it would. Yeah,
autumn is lovely.
I would want it to be. Yeah. The summer is cold. I think that I probably would have kept it, but again, it's hard to say. And when you've grown up, I mean, the thing that we have to realize, and the thing that we started to touch on, I think last week when we talked about Juliana, is they lived their entire lives basically in this super oppressive society where they have no shot, they have no free will almost. I mean, they have free will, but it's very limited by the state. So any decision that you make like that, there's just a lot of danger. I mean, you're constantly afraid in a way especially like Frank is Jewish. I mean, he knows that. He's just trying to fly under the radar. He even sort of professes to that while he's in the cell. Like, I'm just trying to live. I'm just trying to survive. That's it. And even that, obviously, we're seeing is not super easy because, I mean, he didn't do anything directly. Just Juliana ran off with a film, and now all of a sudden his sister and her kids, that's right, his niece and nephew are sitting in one of the creepiest little holding rooms I've ever. That's the creepiest green room.
Worst green room ever.
And cartoons are so prevalent. I don't know why this keeps standing out to me, but I find it so strange how much they're showing cartoons throughout the series, and it just adds that level, that ambiance of just the creepy nature, and it definitely goes in tangent with the opening, and it's almost like that child. We're looking down the hallway and it's the 2 twins, and the show, it's just a very uncomfortable.
I keep trying to find what the shows that they're referencing referencing in the show are. Right. There was a cop drama I'll play on one of the TV screens, and I was like, okay, well, is that just the Nazi version of Cops? I mean, I don't know, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know how much of that is worth reading, or how much I'm over-reading reading into it too much.
Even if it doesn't inform the plot, I will say this: that stuff is really cool. The fact that they have this other programming inside this show is really awesome. And when he was playing with a TV set,
and the slivers, you're not even, the angle's not even perfect. Like you're just getting a slant, and you can tell they built a graphic, they built an entire that was a production team who put together the fake commercial, the cartoon, the animation. The
production is so great.
It's great. Really great. The only thing that I've noticed that they've been missing is when it comes to billboards in the West Coast, is a lot of the scripture is it's not accurate as to what it's saying. It'll say pharmacy outside of a it'll be a shop for whether it be jiu-jitsu or aikido or whatever, a JoJo, and then it says pharmacy in the front of it, and so that's one of those things that you're kind of you're like, oh, you went so far, you got so close.
The Japanese word for pharmacy is the same.
It's universal. It means numerous things.
Their CVS is way different than ours.
But I mean, it goes into that relationship where, do you think they would be able to rekindle, just from what we know in this situation, would Frank and Juliana be able to rekindle that romance, having both placed one another in a situation of you die for me or I die for you, and Frank eventually ends up kind of giving her up and letting her like he did all he could, but his balance was his family, and he gets to a point where my family's in that room watching cartoons, and he knows that they're gonna I forget what I wrote down, what they it's a super dark the gas that they use.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was. I think it was like the actual gas, and they go on to say that they've improved it. They've improved it.
Yeah,
since
it's
the war, so
odorless now and it's faster,
yeah.
and it's like he's handed this photo of it of his sister and his nephew and niece, and it's what I don't think any of us would not. You'd be like, okay, the girl I'm dating or my family,
Yeah,
it's
right.
like I wouldn't expect somebody to choose me over their
their family.
Yeah.
But he ultimately does, I guess. He does, but he says, kill me, don't kill them. Kill me, don't kill my sister. And then they're like, yeah, okay. But even then, I'm like, that's your whole leverage over this guy. He has the information you want. You gave him all day to decide a photo, and then now you're just gonna kill him and his family and not get any information.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of I'm not sure that was the best way to go about that.
And I thought by releasing him, it's like, geez, you guys really inoculated him to the cause.
Yeah,
It was like,
you kind of just wound him up, You're like, we're gonna put you next to a resistance member.
Yeah.
He's gonna yell some propaganda while we're doing some super mean stuff to you.
Gas your family and then set you free after we put you in front of a firing squad.
So we're cool, right?
We're cool, bro.
Like fist bump this one for me real quick.
yeah.
I'm not sure that's gonna go over.
I think that Frank grew a lot in his relationship and where he went from the beginning of being a little fragile and against really showing his head at all, because as the resistance member said, it's a lot harder to live in an oppressed society than it is to speak out and speak your mind.
Yeah.
And Frank eventually, towards the end, when he spoke to the detective interrogating him, he lets him know, all right, if you need to find another Jewish person to kill, you know where I'm at, and that was his first step of standing up and being like, I'm no longer just being subservient.
Him turn that corner was really interesting. That he would have words like that, because this is a man who was so timid when he was getting thrown into the car, and even I would say halfway through his time in the cell, that all of a sudden he's now turned a corner where he's kind of turning and saying something back to someone in such a high position of power. I thought it was interesting what you were going to say.
Yeah, no, I think that he just had such an awesome arc, and I think that now he's a man in a way that he wasn't necessarily before. Well, I actually kind of would like to talk about Joe's arc, because he's the other character that I think had a really powerful arc. And again, this was a very character-driven episode, and I kind of feel like that's going to be pretty much the norm for the show, is a lot of character-driven stuff. But yeah, so Joe, we find out at the end of the last episode, obviously, that he's working for Obergruppe and Führer. I'm going to say it, John Smith, but I learned it, so I'm going to say it. And then over the course of this episode, I'm not... he still is he's still checking in, but there's certain things I noticed. Okay, one of the first things I noticed was that he didn't report Juliana, even though he figured out Juliana was this person, because Obergruppe and Führer, John calls Joe and tells him that, hey, we're looking for this girl from San Francisco, she's carrying a film. I mean, it's obviously Juliana. He knows that, but he doesn't say anything.
It is intriguing.
Peculiar.
And it leads me to their relationship and what is driving Joe to be so considerate and kind and helpful. I mean, this is a random woman that he comes across, and the first thing she says to him is, she's like, you're not looking for a Trudy, are you? And he's like, I don't know, I'm not looking for a Trudy. But he helps her. He buys her coffee, he pays for a hotel room for numerous nights, and asks with nothing in exchange. And so what's his motive?
Well, I gotta be honest, I thought that he knew who she was. I thought when he met her at the bar and paid for her coffee initially, that he sort of knew that he was looking for her, or that,
she might be. So he's facilitating.
So I thought that he was just trying to get in with her, but then it seemed like a moment of who? Oh, it's a woman. He seemed shocked to hear that there was a woman carrying this film. So I was like, oh no, I think he was just being nice. I think he just had a little crush or something. I guess maybe they don't let you.
They do a nice job with the juxtaposition of sort of saying, okay, well, he's a Nazi spy, but he really is a genuine good guy. And that's what made it so hard when he answers, when he's on the phone and he's like, Heil Hitler at the end of the phone call. It's like, oh man, I thought this was this kind of Captain America good American kid.
Yeah.
So to see it turn that corner was
but you have to say Heil Hitler in that situation.
He is the one of the only ones that we've seen actually kill a Nazi. So in my book, Nazi won.
Well, yeah, he killed that one Nazi, and I thought he was going to kill another one, and then Juliana ended up killing. Because I don't know if guys, I almost missed this, but when he was talking to Obergruppe and Führer on the phone, apparently that guy was an SD who they look over the SS. So he's a very high-ranking sort of Secret Service. Again, I'm not super, but he was sort of a rogue operative, it seemed like.
Yeah, and he said avoid him.
For a different government organization, or maybe he was rogue and outside
an overseeing. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was definitely a Nazi, though. He was trying to I don't know, trying to get people to buy Bibles.
Which is confusing. I'm glad that you brought up the Bibles. Is, to me, that is not a book that would be under the Reich banned or illegal. Like that seems right up the alley of something that they'd be propagating. And so for a Bible to be banned, are they banning just religious and theology in general, where it's we will give you what you're going to worship, and anything outside of the lines?
That version of the Bible, I don't know. I mean, was that?
It was Old Testament.
Like you know a little bit more about.
I thought it was Old Testament. The book was Old Testament, which is, as a Jewish kid, that's what we learned and read in the temple and all that. And so when someone still had that, I was like, as a Jewish individual, I was like, oh man, that's bad news. That book is, not bad news, but that book's going to cause a lot of trouble.
Yeah, necessity.
So I guess if they were trying to eliminate a portion of the Bible to eliminate a portion of or a religious group, you would probably look to take that out. So I don't know. It was pretty crazy to me to hear someone having that book.
But isn't it interesting, the man folding the crane, like the origami, that's a book that he would reference. He would reference a passage from that book. And was that his way of trying to lure in a resistance member to get the information? Or was that more of just this is something, like, is this a passage that he was passionate about? Because I almost thought that he was disbanded from the Reich. And he was kind of, like you said, a little bit of a rogue agent. So his story kind of just came and went.
I'm curious if it was that he got into trouble, and by capturing her, he saw that is his way of getting back in. I unfortunately, I don't think we get to ask and kind of find out what his story was now that, or the way that all kind of played out. But
because we think, at least I thought that he was the guy that they're looking for, and I think obviously Juliana thought he was.
Yeah.
But he knew about the film because he asked her for the film, and he clearly was there looking for people. So maybe he's just trying to scout out people before the man in the high castle, quote unquote, makes contact with them or something.
Yeah.
But he knew about the film. He was gonna kill her. It obviously didn't. I don't know if in a world where the Nazis and the Japanese Empire have control of the U.S., that I would trust a man folding origami at a diner.
Yeah.
That's a very...
It's peculiar.
Yeah.
You walk in and be like, I'm going to go to a different diner.
Maybe it's more commonplace, but I wouldn't be like, oh, he's the resistance member there practicing Japanese origami.
Clearly. You're just like, that guy's got some skills that he learned somewhere. I'm like, exactly. I don't know how to even do one of the little games when you were in middle school.
Right.
You're going to kiss Billy. Oh, man.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was a red balloon. Those were so cool, though.
But speaking of kissing, I think that Juliana absolutely is now going to be intrigued on kissing Joe, because when he pulled his gun out, but I almost for an instant thought that he was aiming it at her, and then and he was just so quick to pull the trigger. And in the first episode, he shot the Nazi without a second's hesitation. He just pulls the trigger, and here he clearly had the shot, and he could have shot the man, but instead he just decides to avoid the SD agent.
And I sort of wondered if that was him having seen the film. Because if you remember, he's sitting in the hotel room watching all that film, and if that started to kind of knock some of the bolts loose upstairs as far as his own Nazi brainwashing is gone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I thought initially, and now that I'm kind of analyzing it, so I think it's still here's I don't know if this is like a prediction, but I think that it's still ambiguous. I think that we've seen him kill Nazi. I was going to say Nazis, but Nazi so far in defense of his mission, just to prove to someone that he was on their side, right? So we've seen that happen before, so I don't think that he's afraid to do that again. But yeah, I think that he's seen the film now, so I think that he would have gone to save her because she is important to his mission, regardless of whether or not that he had seen the film. But I think it's ambiguous because now that he has seen the film, he seemed to be sort of. I mean, we didn't get a whole lot from that because we didn't actually see any of the footage.
What he saw,
we saw like a reflection of it, kind of. But we saw him seeing it, and I feel like there was something going on there. So I think that we don't. And I think this is going to play out over the rest of the season where he stands in all of this. I think it's still a mystery.
Yeah. And when his relation with Juliana and just how he responds to the film. He sees the film, he goes, he pulls the gun, he doesn't pull the trigger, and it's just so much different from Oberhubenführer. John Smith. We're going with John Smith. With John Smith, he's just so different in his tact and the way that he handles his mission. And so I would like to talk about their relationship because it seems like they're very familiar with one another. And
you mean John and Joe?
John and Joe. Okay. Yeah, John and Joe. Because we see that the breakfast scene when it opens up and they're sitting there and John Smith has his table. His family looks very proper, very well put together.
Right. Very Hitler Youth.
Very Hitler Youth. Yeah. And the issue is the boy is sitting at the table and I know in my household, folks would be like, yes.
Like,
So,
you're
like,
studying
like
at the
after they
table?
come here, yeah,
Study.
yeah.
My
I
parents
can't
would be
believe you're
weirded out
studying.
if I had a book at the table.
And so to have it be like an issue, like this is not polite. You don't do this at the table. You should have had your setting done prior. And he explains the reason why is because he's pretty much saying he wants to beat out the American youth, if we're going Nazi youth versus American, because that kid's a nonconformist and he embodies what America's fallacy was.
He sounds like a Cali bro. He
Yeah.
sounds like long
hair, don't
doesn't
care. Where he wears his rainbows to class,
exactly.
it doesn't matter.
I think
as soon as I heard about like the long hair and him like talking back to these teachers, I'm like, this is not a kid who gets good grades on his tests.
Yeah.
Apparently
And why are
he's
you
acing
worried?
his test.
Yeah. So I mean, like, why are you upset? I'm like, man, the guy's an individual and he's nailing his test. So, like, that's
Way to
positive.
go.
Yeah. But I like just how they filmed that scene in the sense that they really set up that how he views the world. And John Smith views the world, and your country is first. The people that your family and your government and everyone involved in that comes first over your individuality.
Right.
And the Raphael or the child, he didn't believe that, and he was like, all right, that's why you can study, is because the reason that his son responded was, okay, well, you're doing it for the right reason, you can stay at the table. But then he gets a phone call, and it's from his agent in the field, and he calls him Joe. And it's like, that's definitely going to be breaking and it's contradictory to what he's doing, because he's receiving a phone call at breakfast, which is his son's not allowed to read a textbook.
But he can take a phone call. Interesting.
From a soldier.
Oh, the hypocrisy.
And the soldier calls him, they speak on first name basis, which no commanding officer is going to let a soldier in the field refer to him or call him at home where his family could speak to him, which leads me to believe that there's a relationship between the two. Do you think that there might be some backstory since he knew his father?
I think there has to be, and I don't know what that will. I would love to see the two of them in the same place, and I don't know if that's going to happen over the course of this season. I think maybe eventually it will, but I think that we might have to wait for that to really understand their relationship. But yeah, it seemed casual.
Yeah,
I mean, again, I think that if you have an operative in the field like that, especially like they're outside of what is Nazi-controlled America at that point, referring to each other by their first name, like calling the hotel, it seems sort of casual, like you're not worried about anyone being like listening to the phone lines, but yet he varies his drive to work every day. But he's just like, oh, hey Joe, how's it going?
It just seems very contradictory. That's the one thing that makes me feel like there is the familiarity there of a family friend, a closeness, some camaraderie between the two that is forcing Joe, and that's the burden. That's why he feels a little compelled to stick the course and follow it, because it's, how do you disobey from family friends? It's like the family business is being a Nazi.
Well, it's also, I don't know, I think that the decisions that these people have to make, as much as we can say it's about, or maybe for some other characters it is, for like John Smith it is, but as much as we say it's about the nation or about the state, you're living for this bigger thing. I think that especially the characters that are the most engaged, or the leading characters, I guess, in the series, are going to make all of their decisions based on the people around them, the people they care about. Like Juliana left because Trudy decided to do this, and Trudy died, so that's Juliana left, and Frank decided not to rat on Juliana because of the relationship they share, even against his relationship with his sister and his niece and nephew. And they're making these decisions not necessarily based on this big macro view of, well, I must do this for country, for God and country, for the state, or for whatever it might be. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pay for this girl's coffee, not because I think that she might be crucial in my mission, but because maybe he hasn't seen a girl in a few days. I don't know. I don't know.
He's been on the road.
Yeah,
he's been on the road. All he's had is a sandwich that the officer gave him.
And who knows what it was like back in New York? Maybe.
Everyone has needs.
He was at Nazi school, man.
Nazi school.
Zach, you mentioned something before we sat down that I thought was really interesting when you're talking about the scene with John Smith, and when he's driving, and you mentioned that he varied his route every day, and so there's like, potentially there's a spy within, which is shocking to see the resistance getting moving. They're like, wow, the resistance actually has infiltrated Germany, but the frustration of not being able to hit one guy.
They shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, and then reload and shoot and shoot and shoot some more, and it was like, it was so frustrating.
They were like stormtroopers.
Totally. Yeah, it's like,
And I think that's actually where the term stormtrooper comes from. Isn't it from like some SS troop or something?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I think so. Don't quote me on that.
That'd be a terrible quote.
But yeah, I think that, I mean, how many shots do you think they fired into that cabin?
Clips, like Tommy guns.
Like nothing. Like one guy. I
was kind of watching it devolve. You're like, oh, of course they're not going to get him there, and then he gets up and the guy goes to shoot him and takes so long to get him again and misses 4 or 5 times. The guy just wheels around and gets him. And
what happened to the people behind him in the truck? Did they just explode? Was that
they were just
randomly blew up?
Yeah, they were cookies. Just all of a sudden
they missed and shot their own truck and it just exploded.
What can you do?
I mean, it goes to show that the resistance not only is they're making movement, they're moving forward and they're actually getting some ground. The fact that they're able to infiltrate Germany, but at the same time, they do not know what they are doing by any means.
They're very scattered, but I'm glad to see that they exist, which is we didn't really know what kind of presence they had before this, but they were able to somehow, so we think maybe they have an inside guy, maybe, or they were just had a bunch of different roadblocks set up. Who knows what the actual case was, but I think it'd be more interesting if they had an inside guy.
Which would be great.
Yeah, and they were able to launch this attack and try to take out Obergruppen and Fuhrer. Of course, we did learn that they lost a resistance leader, right? Was
the high-ranking official disappeared.
That was the guy. Was that the guy who they strung up and beat in episode 1?
No, that was the resistance leader that they lost, and he thought that was John Smith thought that was a retaliation for their killing of the resistance leader.
Right. Okay.
And so they thought that was retaliation. That's why one of theirs disappeared. But it doesn't explain at all how they were able to find out a changing route. Right. And how, to stop, and they were parked there, they were waiting, and if the route is changing, that means it's not only is it somebody that's inside, but it's somebody that's inside it and extremely close to John Smith.
Did they plan these routes out in advance? Because I feel like I would just take it right here.
Like the day of, Yeah, Johnny on the spot.
Like a horrible Uber rider.
Yeah, you're not using Waze. You're like, no, take the same route every day. Well, once turn left, you got to take Fountain. You got to take Fountain. It's just the cleanest route. And I mean, one of the other relationships I'd like to move into is one that I think is just contradictory to the nations as themselves. Is we've got Japan and Germany, and they are allies out of convenience. They are not by any means allies because they like each other. They've got the same values, and you can see this the remorse in their face where we adopt those values of what is the racial values or the racial laws of Germany. And so these two gentlemen, and you've got, I wrote their names down, it's the Rudolf Wegner and, I'm going to say his name wrong, Nobusuke Tagomi. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Nobusuke Tagomi.
Which I think he's a high-ranking diplomat within the Japanese.
He's the ambassador, I think? Is that what we said up in the first episode? I'll need to check that to be sure, but I think he's the ambassador.
Like a diplomat almost.
So to see the espionage from the rank officials of this high up and both sides and them working together for a peaceful resolution, knowing that the Fuhrer's health is at risk, it's shocking because there's a secret there. And they haven't revealed what that secret is, but it's got to be something that both people who otherwise would have nothing but a lap of luxury in their lives, what could drive them to a point of 2 times Swedish passport and him holding these meetings repeatedly with people coming in and interrogating from the SS. It's not a quiet scenario to have a secret meeting.
Right. It seems dangerous. I mean, it's obviously very dangerous. I'm interested. I want to know more about their history, but they clearly have a common. I think it's safe to assume the common goal is to, if possible, I don't know if it's possible, but prevent the escalation to war between the two nations. That seems to be what they're both afraid of. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Zach? Do you think that there could be?
Seeing his relationship, seeing the diplomat almost like his assistant, in the way that he tries to treat the Swede kind of as he comes and goes. And the nasty looks that he shoots him, you have to think there's something. I mean, there's obviously something going on, but I can't figure it out for the life of me. And I don't know. Every time he comes into the room, the guy shoots him a nasty look, or the camera kind of hangs on him, and to very clearly make the point that this guy does not like him.
Well, Taylor, and if you were in this situation where this is your world, this is your realm, and you're a high-ranking official on either party, and it's a situation where you're going to risk it all for a secret, do you think it's going to be something? Because when they broke down, when they were talking in the diner, it was the Japanese are working for what's after the sun, and it's selflessness, and the Nazis nothing. And so I couldn't imagine a Nazi, even from Sweden, doing something for a selfless purpose for peace, for... just because he wants things to be hunky-dory. I feel like it's selfish.
The Nazis seem very what's the word? They just seem very confident, even on Japanese soil. We have that scene where they're just sort of laying down the law. Like, they feel very sure of themselves. And you sort of get the vibe that the Nazi state is more powerful than the Japanese American states. I mean, even in size, but in everything. I'm kind of wondering what's going on outside of the U.S. too, because we haven't seen anything outside of what's going on just in the States. I mean, they obviously would be like, those two empires would be controlling more than just the U.S. and their respective countries. So I think that there's going to be a big disparity of power. I think it's clear why, in that, if that's true, the Japanese government would want to avoid conflict. I guess maybe that's why the Germans are so sort of sure of themselves, is because they don't necessarily want to avoid the conflict. I love this beyond the sun sort of things, because it's first of all, it's sort of a I think it has to do with the sun being like the rising, like the Empire of the Rising Sun. But there's a song called that I love. It's like Hitori Bochi no Yoru.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it sounds right. But I grew up listening to that song. It was it's called the Sukiyaki song, and I looked at the translation because it played during one of the sort of montage scenes this episode. And it one of the lyrics, it's like the bridge is like there's happiness lies above the sky, happiness lies above the clouds. And I was like, I wonder if, because they're tying in Bible verses this episode, and then that song played. Here we go.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's catchy.
Yeah. Do you remember this?
Yeah. And it's such an upbeat, like, it's so, and that's the surreal nature of the show, is all of their music is just on point with, it seems upbeat or it's creepy and looming, but it doesn't necessarily fit, but it does at the same time. It's that weird juxtaposition, like you're saying earlier, of this evil situation with a very, like, pleasant and like a little beat. You're tapping your foot and then you're like, what am I doing? Like,
exactly. This is awful. This is a horrible situation. But I don't know. I'm loving how they're tying these weird pop culture things that are relevant in either Japanese culture or in German culture, or Third Reich culture at least, into, and even like the Bible. Like, I just want more of that. Like, I'm so into that right now, how we're tying all this stuff together.
It really shows the legitimacy of the scenario that we're in and the world that we're in, and whether we still haven't defined whether this is a parallel world where Americans actually won and it's been covered over by a PR campaign of some extreme magnitude, or whether this is just in a completely different universe that parallels our own.
Should we maybe move like into doing some predictions on that sort of stuff?
I love that.
Well, should we move to predictions?
Oh, there it is. The cue. I like it. Spooky. It fits the mood and the tone of the show.
I think there's pieces I need to know, and I'm dying to know. Like, I want to know what's going on in Canada and Mexico. Did those just get absorbed by someone? Right. But at the same time, I sort of have this weird kind of feeling, the way that they all talk about Hitler. There's really no. They never show him, other than in the kind of propaganda reels that they play. And I have this weird feeling seeing the reels and seeing that there's video of us winning and seeing us put the flag in the ground and a VE Day and all of that maybe we won the war and then someone at home blew up Washington. It sounds, as I say it sounds so insane. But, maybe that's what happened, and then it became really easy just because you don't have the same depth of information and access to information
in 1940s
the 1940s as you do now, so pretty easy to kind of pull the wool over.
Yeah, because nobody's going to be able to see anything that happened back home. They're just getting what the media, and that just shows the power of media. Right. And they're really showing that in the show throughout it.
Sure, the propaganda and everything, and the film. I mean, the fact that they've made films these films so important. The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, that's what it's called, right? The fact that this film means so much. Just in the plot outside of like the actual footage that it holds means like, oh, okay, like, wow, the media is drastically important, which it was at the time too. Yeah. It was at the time of the war. I think that, I think for one, the film we'll start to see more and more. I hope we get to see it all the way through at some point. As far as whether or not because at the end of the first episode, I was convinced that this happened. Like the Allies had won the war, and something had happened, like the wool was being pulled over their eyes, or something happened that messed that up, or their people are being lied to. I'm not 100% convinced that's the case because of something. The resistance guy, I forget his name, Randall, was that his name? Who was next to Frank.
Frank in the cell, yeah.
He said it's something that could be true, and I remember that the could being like,
Yeah.
So it didn't happen because I was hoping he would go like, we did win or something. And
so then, what's your prediction? Do you believe that in this situation, the information we've been revealed so far is true?
I'm gonna make this prediction, but that scene made me less gung-ho about it. But I think that, we were just talking about wanting to see stuff outside of the States. Well, I think that if we go to Canada or Mexico, or if we go to Japan or to Europe, that there is something wrong there. Like either the Allies did win the war, or the Nazi and Japanese empires aren't as stable or secure as we think that they are. Maybe they're maybe they are for some reason sort of nuclear, not like the bomb, but like nuclear in that they're contained somehow in the U.S. and that outside of that the world is a different place, and that's why we're not getting much of a taste. I could be totally wrong,
but it makes sense.
That's my prediction as we stand right now, at least, that there's something else going on.
I think you can attribute the same thing that Reynolds said is, the only thing for evil to win is for a great man to do nothing.
Right.
And in the situation, I think that is attributed to the nations surrounding the United States as well. If we're trying to predict whether the Germany and Japan have been able to take over the United States and all as we know is norm, then the other nations, I couldn't imagine them not stepping in had they not won. Had they not won the war. If it was a propaganda.
Do you think Switzerland's still neutral?
Yeah, it's still on the
I think
sidelines.
that's where they get the passport from, right? They're the only one looking at it going, okay.
Yeah, Switzerland.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys
You're
are cool.
clearly German. You're very clearly German, but okay.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I also want to predict that we're going to go to Washington, D.C. at some point this season.
Oh, yeah.
I think that we're going to see
torn and
DC.
tattered.
Well, that's the thing. Is that maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It probably is, but maybe it isn't, though. Yeah. And that would be a big reveal. It'll probably happen later in the season.
I think if you're going to pull the wool over everyone's eyes just for aesthetic appeal, you still need to. I mean, whether the inside looks fine, everything's fine, but you rough the outside up a little bit, chip off some bricks.
Just a bad paint job.
Yeah, they're like, the neighborhood really went downhill after Eisenhower, man. That's it. Yeah. And it's I just like seeing the situation where these countries and the people within each little sector in the United States is so compartmentalized to their own ideals of the neutral zone. They don't really discuss anything outside of they're like, okay, it's bad, but they don't reveal the neutral is neutral. They're not talking about the neutral zone. They're not doing anything. The Pacific states talk specifically about everything that's going on in the Pacific states. They're rarely referencing what's happening on the East Coast. And the East Coast this is ours.
Right,
the whole world is ours. And it just leads me to believe that the United States couldn't have won in the situation without the rest of the world stepping in, or at least some
maybe we were the last to fall, sort of thing. Because I mean,
that'd be amazing.
Europe probably would have fallen, I guess, before
a little bit before we did. Yeah,
the history element to it is what blows my mind. Is did we lose on D-Day? Did Hitler get the tanks to Normandy like he was? Because there was a lot of things that Hitler overlooked to actually lose World War II.
Yeah, like what happened?
Did he stop bombing England? Because Winston Churchill's on record saying if they kept bombing us, we would have eventually had to fold, and we just wouldn't have had enough able-bodied men to fly planes to fight them.
Right.
And so where did the war turn? Where did we end up losing it?
Yeah.
And that stuff is, I don't know, I just can't figure that out.
It's intriguing.
Super fascinating.
Well, let's move on to our closing thoughts and just the episode Sunrise as a whole.
Do you have any predictions for us?
I think that as a whole, that Germany and Japan won the United States, and I think that they're using propaganda because in itself, I'm going to predict that the Fuhrer is already dead. And just because they're just putting such emphasis on media and the power of propaganda, the power of media, and if he's dead, and so I think that's the secret between Rudolph and Nabusuki. I think that's the secret, is that the Fuhrer is dead, and they have evidence that the Fuhrer is dead.
Oh, that's really
and so that's their way of
maybe the man in the high castle, that whole thing is just some way to lure people in with this idea of false hope,
an ideal,
to try to bring people who are being dissonant from the state, lure them into the neutral zone, and there's not really the resistance doesn't really have a presence there or something.
Wow.
Ooh,
which would be great. I mean, I would love that. I'd get excited. I'd scoot up in my chair as that started happening. Zach, do you have any closing thoughts of the episode as a whole? Of how you felt about Sunrise?
No, I like where it's going. I think all pilots are tough. I thought the first episode I was like, okay, well, I really want to see this. I think they did such a wonderful job, and even just the little details of seeing. It's so creepy seeing like a swastika stamped on a mailbox. And all those little things. So I really wanted to see what was going to happen in the second episode, and I was really happy with it. You can kind of start to see where it's going, or at least guess and hope to guess where it's going. But yeah, I enjoy the direction of it. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Frank now, which it sounds like the word. It sounds like a Jewish rapper.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Frank.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see kind of his next move of, is he just going all in now that his world's kind of blown up on him?
Yeah, Taylor?
Yeah, I want to see Joe's stuff. I want to see sort of what he really feels about Juliana, and how much of, I want to see how driven he is by his mission, and how driven he is by, because he does, I feel like he can't help but have this other thing internally that maybe he wants the tapes to be true, or maybe he just sees something in her. So I want to see his journey. Episode 1, I was like, exposition, but awesome world. And this episode, I'm like, awesome series. Like, they've got
really get into it. And Netflix did a study on their own series, because this new release of binge watching, and they showed that usually even some of the biggest series like Sons of Anarchy took until episode 5 or 6 before people were like, I'm this is my show, and I'm going through it. So I think that Man in the High Castles really jumped the gun in terms of what they were able to build in 2 episodes, and I am doing everything in my power to not binge watch the series so that I'm not leaking anything, and it's frustrating because I'm like, I got the password. I've got all the power. I think the only closing thoughts I have is I really like that the arcs of the whole series, with each character, we saw the relationships between each person, we saw the arcs between each individual, whether it be Juliana and Frank or Joe and John, and the show in itself had that perfect arc where we open up on the bridge. They go for that sunrise. They get to see what's going on. They're actually bonding a little bit over something that's completely unrelated to the mission as a whole. It's just a beautiful moment between the two of them. Yeah. And then the last beautiful moment.
He looked east and she looked west.
Oh, it's perfect. Right? Home. And I like that they bookended it, like you were saying earlier, the same way. And they were able to bring on the bridge, but instead of this being a peaceful, it's the mission in itself is full-fledged, and there's no hiding anymore. They're both very clear what's going on. It happens on the bridge at the same location. And it's the first time Juliana actually showed any emotion. She has to kill somebody to react, not watch somebody be killed. So that's very clear.
It's different, I guess.
So I mean, I think the show as a whole is just spectacular. I'm really looking forward to what episode 3 brings to us. And you guys, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to the AfterBuzz TV, each of us individually. Zach?
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you give everybody your Twitter?
Twitter again is at Zach is Zach. That's ZACH.
And my name is Taylor Boldt. You can find me on Twitter at Tayboldt, TayBoldt, and on Instagram at Tboldt.
And my name is Keith Black. You can find me all over the internet and all social media sites at Keith W. Black. Thank you guys very much. Tune in next week for number 3.
Yes. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Woo.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.